Hello, and welcome back to the Veteran Benefits Podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Deming. I'm really excited today. We have a special guest for you, Leah Bucholz, the CEO and founder of Prestige Veteran Medical Consulting. So, Leah, welcome to the show. I've got a lot of questions for you, but can you start off by introducing yourself to our guests?
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Rebecca. I'm so happy and excited to be here. My name is Leah Bucholz. For those of you guys who haven't seen any of my videos before, I'm a U.S. Army veteran, physician assistant, and former compensation and pension examiner. I own a company, Prestige Veteran Medical Consulting, and we specialize in independent medical opinions for VA disability purposes for veterans seeking VA disability. The company, we have a dedicated team of healthcare professionals, many of which, like you guys, are veterans and disabled veterans. And a lot of them are former compensation and pension examiners as well. Our mission is to basically provide clear and credible medical opinions with sound assessments of the records and help that can help veterans and their legal professionals obtain those benefits that the veterans deserve.
Some Leah. I've done some podcast episodes in the past. Well, I've done some with you, Leah, on your podcast as a guest, and you've asked me a bunch of questions about the legal side of stuff. So now it's my turn to ask you about the medical side of things. And I did a podcast episode that aired recently about what a CMP exam is. So if you haven't heard that one, please go back and listen to it. But Leah, can you talk a little bit about what a Nexus letter is? I know that's a term that floats around a lot in the veteran circles and stuff, but I don't know if everybody really knows what that is.
Sure. Nexus letter is sort of like the slang term for an independent medical opinion. And an independent medical opinion is a letter written by a licensed healthcare professional that explains or it aims to demonstrate how the veteran's current service or current condition, whether it's an illness or an injury, is at least as likely as not related to their military service. It tries to connect the three essential elements, which is a current medical diagnosis, an in-service exposure, or injury. And then that nexus is the piece that shows that, they're related, right? So we don't decide whether they're related, but we aim to write that in a report so that the adjudicators can sort of piece that together.
It's a really good point, Leah, that I think a lot of people say, they ask us, well, if I get a Nexus letter, am I guaranteed to win my claim? So do you want to talk a little bit about the role of a Nexus letter in putting together a good claim or an appeal?
Sure. So external medical opinions are never required, right? So generally speaking, a medical opinion is going to be provided if VA determines that there's enough evidence to offer a CMP or compensation and pension examination. So at no cost to the veteran, the VA will provide that exam. The medical opinion may or may not be favorable, right? But a veteran does have an opportunity to get an external medical opinion if they so choose from their treating provider, whether it's a civilian provider or maybe even a VA provider or a company like mine who just forensically reviews the documents, and they can submit that with their claim in support of their contention.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, no, that's really helpful. When you say you guys forensically review the evidence, can you talk to us a little bit about what your process is for deciding whether you can write a Nexus letter? Will you write a Nexus letter for everybody? What's the process look like for you?
So for us in particular, everyone is different, but for us, what we do at Prestige is we have a sort of a record review process, which is like a consultation that will look over all of the veterans' issues. It doesn't matter how many issues that you ask us to review now or in the future. And we do, I hate to talk about money, but we do that for a $200 fee, right? So it's a small fee. It might be a lot for some veterans, but that affords the person the opportunity to consult with and communicate with a medical professional about an unlimited number of issues that they'd like to have reviewed, their back, sleep apnea, mental health, whatever. And it never expires. So we're going to review and entertain any question that a veteran has about whether or not, it's a contention that they believe is related to their service and whether or not we believe we can support it with a positive medical opinion. And again, remember, these are just opinions. So just because my opinion is that, I don't see evidence supporting this from a medical standpoint, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's, a definite yes or no. It's just you're asking for our medical opinion based on the facts of the case and the records and the history.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful to know because sometimes people think that something is connected to service, or I think more often we've talked about this in the past, both on your podcast and I've talked on this show a little bit about secondary service connections. So if VA acknowledges that your back condition is related to service, and you also have a hip condition because your back makes you walk with a limp and a guarded gait or something like that, or you have nerve damage from a pinched nerve in your back because that back injury, that those are secondary service connected disabilities. And I think sometimes me as a non-medical professional, I don't know where to go to say, is it possible that
Mhm.
tinnitus or tinnitus, the ringing in the ears, could cause migraines, or can that condition cause can migraines cause,
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know, like, can migraines cause diabetes?
Right.
Maybe there's medical literature out there, but it's something that I might ask you, and you might say, no, unfortunately, there's no connection between those two, right?
So we try to lean into, firstly, we lean into our education and training within the scope of our licenses, right? So whether it's a physician assistant, a nurse practitioner, a psychologist, a physician, a medical doctor, whatever the skill level of the person is that is looking at the evidence is going to lean into their professional education and training and their knowledge within the scope of that license, right? And then we're going to do research, and some of the things are quite easy. Even a lay person can say, I had all this acoustic noise exposure in service and it's causing me to have hearing, deficits or tinnitus. We're just going to lean into that professional knowledge that we have. For more complex cases, we're going to look at peer reviewed literature and research things. We don't necessarily, a lot of veterans like to say, well, this BVA case said this veteran got connected for this. We don't like to look at that kind of stuff because every individual case is based on the veteran, right? It's not based on, and that's more of your lane, Rebecca, and you can probably speak to that. But when it comes to the specifics of a case, just because, 100 people got service connected for, their left knee to their right knee doesn't necessarily mean their circumstances were the same as the veteran whose records I'm reviewing. So I look at everything in a customized way based on the individual.
I think that's a really good distinction because I know there are a lot of forums out there on Facebook or Reddit or different places where veterans are sharing information. And so, I mean, I do think it's good information to know that, like, if one veteran got something connected, that means it's a possibility that the two conditions are connected, but it may not mean that just because that veteran walked with a limp because of their disability doesn't mean that you're walking with a limp. Or, if their migraines prevent them from sleeping, it doesn't mean that you get yours during the day doesn't mean that your migraines are causing sleep disturbances or, any kind of variety of things. So it's really awesome that you guys don't have a one size fits all, that you're looking at the veterans' medical records. And sometimes you also look at statements from the veterans, or do you guys talk to veterans or,
Yeah. So the personal history is often, I don't want to say just as important as the record, the contemporaneous record, but like the personal history, the subjective reporting, and especially when we're looking at things that have been denied in the past for like continuity of symptomatology, right? Maybe somebody hurt their back and then there was this large gap in care, and VA says, hey, they weren't diagnosed with their back issue until 15 years after their service. Well, that's when we look at the history of the veteran and their personal statements. And, maybe it's that I'm a veteran, I have back pain, I don't go to the doctor all the time for my back because it's a chronic continuous condition that is, I have arthritis, it's not going to get better. So I self-treat. And that's what veterans say a lot. They might self-treat. Maybe they didn't have insurance. Maybe they weren't in a good financial situation. There's a variety of reasons. So hearing that history from the veteran as often as possible, like getting their perspective and their personal statements, it's critical. Can we write opinions without the history? Yes. Without a personal statement? Yes, we can. Especially we do a lot of cases related to cause of death for surviving spouses. So sometimes we're not able to get that, but we can get a history from the spouse or the family member as well.
That's super helpful. Is there anything that you wish veterans knew, or the common mistakes that veterans make that when they come to you that you'd like to clear up?
So things that I see often is like that continuity of symptomatology that we just discussed. Being able to really articulate and explain some gaps in care can be important. Just assuming that VA is going to connect the dots is not necessarily something that's going to happen. I also think that sort of leaning into us, we can do our best to provide that medical opinion, but some veterans are super savvy with navigating VA's legal and administrative process, but that's not something that we can do. So if they have a question working with a legal expert, whether it's, an attorney, a VSO, or whoever, those are the types of questions that, we have one role. The legal folks have one role, and there is some intersection of like, the different portions, because I have to have a familiarization, just as you as the attorney have to have some kind of familiarization with the medical opinion process. But really, sort of those are kind of the most important things that I can think of.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great distinction to make. I'll sometimes tell people, because I read a lot of medical records as an attorney working in this area, and I'll tell my clients or my staff, don't take medical advice from me. I'm an attorney, but I play a doctor on TV or something. I'm not actually a doctor.
You're really very smart with a lot of this. You're, one of my favorite attorneys that I work with, because you do have a really sound grasp on sort of the medical side of things. One other thing I wanted to mention that I think is important is about what you would maybe call bad facts, right? So sometimes veterans think that, not disclosing a risk factor or another incident might hurt their case. And in reality, if that's not the most ethical thing to do, but then also if that's discovered, it sort of like can crush things from a medical perspective. So if you hurt your back in service, but then you got in a car accident, 10 years later, we need to be able to discuss that as well, so that we can provide the most sound medical opinion, despite those risk factors, right? So omitting those kinds of things can sometimes be problematic. So I think that's another thing is just laying it all on the table, good or bad, is important.
I think that's a great point. Because we've definitely, I'm sure you've seen cases, we've won cases where the veteran hurt their back in service or hurt themselves in service and then had a workplace or car accident injury that just aggravated that.
Mm-hmm.
The initial injury happened in service, and then it got worse because of something after service. But it's so much more helpful if you can kind of talk about that in your medical opinion, and it diffuses any kind of defenses that VA might come up with when they're trying to poke holes in the theory. It's been so defeating when because sometimes we come into cases later on and we don't know what's been communicated before our representation. And if we come into a case and then VA discovers some intervening cause that's never been disclosed, it's so much harder to go back and kind of roll that back and keep the credibility of the client because they haven't been disclosing something. Keep the credibility of the veteran because they kind of got caught with their pants down on something like that. So no, I think that's a really good point for you to bring up. Thank you for saying that I'm good with the medical stuff. I mean, I think you're also really good with you've done enough of these that you understand the role of the Nexus letter in the legal process and kind of how it fits in and a lot of the legal theories. But like, I know my place of, my limits of medical knowledge. I'll be like, think I've read articles or I've seen Nexus letters that support this in the past. Do you think you can support it for this veteran? I know you've had veterans ask you to go ahead and file a claim or to do the kind of the claim administration or like something that an accredited claims agent or an attorney would do. And I know that you will always say no, because that's a separation kind of, right?
And there are definitely some legal implications for that, but also it's even filing a claim is one thing. But then like this morning, I got asked a question by a prospective client who just wanted me to review their DBQ that was completed by their podiatrist to see if it was actionable for ratings purposes. And I said, that's not really something that I can do. It's out of my scope. That is something that you want to get a legal professional to look at. And sometimes veterans don't understand that because they're like, well, it's a DBQ. Why? You're medical. Why can't you look at it? Well, because the question that you're asking me is about evidentiary standards and like what, could I probably look at it and say, yeah, that's not a good DBQ? I maybe I could, but that's not my role to do that. And so I defer that to the legal professional so that I can maintain credibility in what I'm doing, which is the scientific portion and letting, you guys do what you do.
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. So you mentioned a DBQ, and I think we've talked about this in the past, but for people who don't know the difference between a DBQ and a Nexus letter, can you explain what the difference is and what the roles of the two kinds of medical evidence are?
Sure. So a DBQ, or a disability benefits questionnaire, is a form that VA uses. It's a standardized form that collects a series of data, a bunch of information that the adjudicators can use to help quantify what the rating percentage should be, right? A medical opinion or a Nexus letter, it is more qualitative in nature, meaning, is this related to service, yes or no? It's an opinion on, I think of it like a light switch, right? So is the light switch on or off? Is this related to service or is it not? That's sort of what the medical opinion is doing. And then the DBQ is, once they determine, yes, this is related, that DBQ is going to help the adjudicators assign a rating, because the DBQ sort of aligns with the Code of Federal Regulation. And they created those forms to help the adjudicators say, okay, they have this symptom, it aligns with this rating percentage. So again, they're can you put the DBQ information in a narrative format in a Nexus letter? Yes, you can, but the VA has created these forms to help streamline their process. And so from my perspective, that's sort of the best explanation of the difference.
Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful. I mean, generally, from my perspective, we don't see VA assigning a rating, granting a claim and assigning a percentage disability without one of those DBQ forms. So if you get a Nexus letter and you don't get a private DBQ, VA is probably going to have to send you for a compensation and pension exam. Do you guys do any DBQs?
So we do. So we do a select number of DBQs. We're a nationwide company, right? So we can help veterans anywhere. And we do it from our remote platform, right? So we do, everything is done. We don't have any physical locations where veterans come in. So we can't do like orthopedic DBQs. For example, a back DBQ requires a physical examination because VA wants to know what the range of motion is. We can do a Nexus letter or an independent medical opinion that helps demonstrate, is this service connected or not, for anything that has evidence to support it, whether that's a psychiatric condition with our psychologists or a medical condition. When it comes to DBQs, we can only do DBQs that can be done based on the review of the records, right? So some examples are, headaches, IBS, GERD, things like that. Anything that requires a physical examination, like knee pain, back pain, even mental health, because there's an interview that needs to be done with those, like a psych evaluation that needs to be done. Anything that needs to be done via like face-to-face evaluation, we don't do DBQs for. But again, we can write a Nexus letter for a psychiatric condition to help show the relationship to service.
The veteran could go to their treating doctor, for example, if their treating doctor is willing to fill one out, and ask them to fill out that form. Right. It's just because you're not physically evaluating them that you're limited in which ones you guys can do.
Correct. So because we're not able to physically do some of the components of those particular DBQs, that's the only reason that we can't do them. But a veteran could go get private evidence from their treating doctor if their treating doctor is willing to complete those. And those forms are pretty straightforward. I've got a bunch of videos on my channel about what happens in a CMP exam for whatever the condition is. It basically runs down the DBQ. So those DBQs are publicly available on va.gov. So a veteran is able to just download them, take them to their treating doctor. If it's a knee DBQ, and ask them, hey, can you please complete this for me? So that's definitely an option, whether it's at the VA. And I know this is a hot button subject, but VA examiners, VHA, the Veterans Healthcare Administration, and the providers there, from my understanding, are able to complete those documents. Whether they will or not, that's up in the air. But you can always ask them, and some of them may fill them out, and some of them may say, "Hey, I don't do those," or whatever. But from my understanding, there's some VA directives that say that they should fill them out, if a veteran requests them. I think there's some nuances about the psych ones, but for physical DBQs, you can certainly ask your VA treating doctor if they will complete one for you.
Yeah, I think from talking to both VA doctors and private doctors, there's some doctors that are they're willing to some doctors are veterans themselves, and that's usually a good sign. But even if they're not a veteran, sometimes they're just willing to help out however they can. And if filling out a form is, they may charge you for the time it takes to fill out the form, for one visit or something. If it's VA, you're not paying for those visits typically anyway. And some of them really want to have kind of a line of like, I'm treating you. I don't want to get in the, cross that line and say, am I advocating for you? Am I not advocating for you well enough while I'm treating you? I think definitely mental health ones are ones where we see a wide variety where some people just won't, some of the treating doctors won't do it at all and some will.
Yeah, and I think it's important to realize too that the DBQ can sometimes be a little more lengthy, but even a medical opinion or a Nexus letter, it doesn't necessarily have to be, a 7-page report. If your treating doctor is willing to even write a couple of sentences just in your regular medical chart, right, that says, he's got an altered gait and I believe his left knee is related to his service-connected right knee, that may be enough in some circumstances to get a veteran connect. So any positive evidence they're willing to provide in any format is not necessarily going to get you across the finish line, but it may be helpful.
Awesome. So I know you were a certified, or you are a certified CMP examiner, as well as running the private company. Do you have any insights you can share with our listeners and viewers about the CMP process, or anything about that you've learned about the CMP process by being a certified examiner that kind of influences the way that you run your private practice?
Sure. So that's a really great question. So I don't do VA CMP exams anymore. That doesn't mean that I wouldn't do them in the future, but I'm just not currently doing them. I did them for a period of time for a few of the different contract CMP companies. I think for me, it's very interesting because I don't recall ever once in the history of my time being a CMP examiner seeing an external medical opinion. Now, is that because I wasn't given there are people over at the VA that put the packets together and send them to the CMP examiners, schedule the exams. We review the evidence. We interview the veteran, examine them. We write the documents and we send them back. I never received external medical evidence like that. That could be because no veteran I ever saw had one, or I'm not really sure what evidence they're putting together when they send them to the examiners. Now, as an examiner, I don't have any say in whether or not you get service connected. And that's something that I think a lot of veterans don't quite understand. Now, the medical opinion heavily influences the adjudicators often, but it's really not up to us. So sometimes a veteran will say, are you going to, when I used to be an examiner, are you going to service connect this? Well, it's not up to me. I'm going to provide maybe in this instance, I'm going to provide a positive medical opinion. Then the VA rater is going to look at the totality of evidence, everything, including my medical opinion. And then they're going to make a decision on the case.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point of distinction, because we see all sorts of errors in the VA system, but we've seen ones where there's a positive CMP exam, like the expert that VA hired to give an opinion gave a positive opinion, and the raters aren't looking at the right evidence, or they're not doing their job correctly, or for whatever reason they still deny it. And then that's something that we would almost always appeal. There are times where the medical opinion's not adequate and VA will send it back for clarification, or they'll weigh conflicting medical evidence or something like that. But yeah, there is sort of that, even though it should be, yes, you've got a favorable medical opinion, VA should grant it. It's not always as smooth or as simple as that.
Well, on the flip side too, I don't see this quite as often, but I have seen it more than I can count on one hand, where a CMP examiner provides a negative opinion. And then, for example, maybe I wrote an opinion and the rater's looking at both sets of evidence and they say that my opinion was more well-formed and supported the facts of the case better and things like that. And they go against their CMP examiner. So I mean, it can go either way, because again, the exam, that doesn't always happen. So I'm not saying, get an opinion from me and it's going to win every time, right? That's the hope, right? But the raters are there to do their best job of looking at everything objectively and weighing all of the evidence, in theory, weighing all of the evidence and following those policies and guidelines that they have.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And It's one of the biggest, most common issues that we file appeals about is that the VA rater didn't adequately rate stuff. And you had some CMP examiner who's just checking boxes and just said no and didn't give any valid reasons why they said no. And then we've got your opinion or whoever the medical provider is. I mean, we work with you a lot because your opinions are usually very thorough. They're always very thorough.
Right.
And you guys are, you do a really good job both with the veterans records and the medical literature and mirroring the language that VA likes to see. But sometimes people come to us with other medical opinions from other providers, or, for whatever reason, um, it makes sense for them to go to a specialist or a
For sure.
different provider or something. But yes, that's one of the most common types of appeals that we file, is explaining why the private medical opinion that we've included with the claim should be given more weight than some conclusory opinion that the VA examiner provided that really doesn't address the evidence as thoroughly as the private opinion. So I think that's part of the reason for having you on is just to share information, but I think it's really helpful for people to see how these two sides of having a legal or claims specialist working with you, an accredited claims agent or an accredited attorney,
Mhm.
and then sometimes also having a medical nexus provider, or instead having a medical nexus provider, how the two things kind of complement each other in a lot of cases.
For sure.
Leah, is there anything else you want to share with the listeners? Anything else you think they should know about the process?
I guess from my perspective is that I feel like it can be such a frustrating process. And I understand that as a veteran myself, I've been on both sides of the table. Okay. I've been a CMP examiner. I've been a veteran having a CMP exam. I've seen so many difficult cases that get denied. I just review so many claims related documents every day, and veterans give up all the time because, they're frustrated. They don't understand the system. It's very overwhelming. And I see cases that can be, they're just filled with errors or mistakes because VA, they try to do their best, right? They're there to serve veterans, but it's a huge bureaucracy and there's a lot of moving pieces. So my last statements would be to just not give up. If you really believe something is related to your service, keep pursuing it. Not everyone needs to hire an attorney. And I know there's a lot of veterans out there that are sort of anxious about doing that, but if your option is you're just going to abandon your case and give it up, consider talking with a VSO or an attorney, because abandoning it is not going to get you anywhere with the claim, but pursuing it with the assistance of an accredited legal professional may take the weight off of you and also turn that around. And for the most part, from my understanding, there's nothing out of your pocket to do that unless, the attorney is successful for you in the long run. So
Right.
Please don't give up your cases. If you really believe that there's a connection, continue to pursue it. Consult with a legal professional like Rebecca or, accredited claims agent or a VSO of your choosing. I mean, that's pretty much it. Don't give up on your case. There's support, things like that.
Awesome. Thank you, Leah. We're going to put your website and information for how to contact Leah in the show notes here. Is there anything you want to share with people about your process for if they do want to engage you?
Sure. So you can reach out to us through our website or, we've got a great YouTube channel with tons of free information. If you're not necessarily ready to get a medical opinion, like I said, for example, if I do a video on migraines secondary to mental health, you can pop on over to my channel on YouTube and I give away all my literature that I use is in my video. So you can go and do the research yourself. I always say can I change the engine out on my truck? Yeah, I probably could if I got the manual and I figured out how to do all of these things, but I'm just going to go take it to the professional and they're going to help me with it. So we're here if you would like us to support you. We try to keep our costs pretty reasonable. Again, you can get support for free from your treating doctor, or at least for the cost of your insurance potentially. So if they're willing to do it, that's great, but we keep our opinions as low as we can. That $200 review fee gets you in the door to discuss anything you want. You're not committed to anything else. Our DBQs are $150, and our medical opinions or our Nexus letters are $600. And we have about a week turnaround time. So again, that's, $600 is a lot of money, and I get that, but we are, using licensed healthcare professionals to do this job, to provide you the best service that we can. and you're not committed to anything, we don't take your back pay. We don't do anything like that. It's just straightforward fees for our service, and got about a week or so turnaround time. We're happy to work with your legal professional, and that's about it about us.
And you also work directly with the veterans. I know we work with Leah, and she works with a lot of other attorneys and legal professionals, but she's one of the few established medical consulting companies that will work directly with veterans if they are just starting their claim or if they want to try to do stuff on their own. So that's often, it's awesome. Sometimes people start on their own and they get 90% of the way there, and then they need to hire a legal professional to get it the rest of the way there. And sometimes people are successful. I see stories all the time about people saying, you don't need to hire an attorney. I got to 100% on my own. You can do it too. And that's great. There's a lot of stories like that. I don't think it's true for everybody, but I do think that that's true for a lot of people. So whatever is right for you, I think there's an option out there, and Leah and her company is a really good option for people.
Well, I have one last thing that you just made me think of,
Yeah.
and that's that we do our best to do things in the most ethical way that we can, because we care about veterans, we care about our mission. And so we will tell veterans no, right? We will tell them, we're not just going to write an opinion to collect a fee. So if we truly don't believe that there's a strong medical connection, it is more important for us to just say, you're paying the $200 to get in the door. Maybe you ask us to look at 5 things, and we can say, well, we can help with this one thing, right? But we would rather tell you no and not collect any additional fees than tell you yes and give you, take fee for a report that we don't believe has strong evidence to support it. And that's, one, because we try to be ethical and care about our clients. And then 2, we've been around for several years now. And if we were just writing garbage opinions that, aren't helping veterans, we wouldn't be here for the long haul to do this. The veteran community would probably say, hey, don't go to them. Right. So
yeah. No, I think that's true.
So that's pretty much all I wanted to say, but I always enjoy. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I always enjoy being a guest on your show. So this was a special treat for you to be a guest on my show. And we will definitely be having you back to talk more about this kind of stuff and share your experience with the listeners. And I'll be a guest on your show anytime. And again, the show notes, the contact information for Leah's company will be in the show notes. If you have any questions or comments, please add them below and like and subscribe. And we hope to hear from you, and we hope to see you on future episodes. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leah. Bye, guys.